The first war did not begin with a king shouting from a throne. It did not begin with bronze swords flashing in the sun or armies marching beneath painted banners. It began much smaller. A missing animal, a field too close to someone else's water, a wall built where there used to be open ground. A young man found dead beyond the edge of the village. And suddenly, for the first time in human history, violence was no longer just one person against another. It became organized. It became planned. It became remembered. Before empires, before kings, before written laws, before soldiers had uniforms or cities had gates, human beings discovered something terrifying. A group could kill like a single body. And once that idea entered the world, it never left. For most of human history, our ancestors lived in small bands. They hunted, gathered, moved with the seasons, and survived by knowing the land better than anything that hunted them. Violence existed. Of course it did. A fight over food. Revenge for an insult. A killing in the dark. But war, real war, is different. War needs memory. War needs identity. War needs us and them. It needs people who are willing to risk death, not just for themselves, but for a group, a territory, a future, a story. So the real question is not simply, when did humans first fight? The real question is, when did humans start fighting as communities? And the answer takes us back to a dangerous turning point, the moment humans stopped wandering and began to stay. At first, staying in one place must have felt like safety, a river nearby, wild grain growing in thick patches, animals coming to drink, clay for building, stone for tools. The kind of place where children could sleep in the same shelter night after night instead of walking until their feet bled. But staying created a new problem. A moving group can walk away from tension. A settled group cannot. Once people began building homes, storing grain, raising animals, and marking space as ours, the world changed. Land was no longer just land. It became inheritance. Water was no longer just water. It became power. Food was no longer eaten as soon as it was found. It could be stored, counted, stolen, guarded. For the first time, humans had things worth defending, and things worth taking. This is where the roots of war begin. Not in evil, not in madness, but in pressure. Picture a dry season that lasts too long. The river shrinks. Fish disappear into the deeper pools. Grain grows thinner. Herds move away. One village still has food stored in baskets and clay-lined pits. Another village has almost nothing left. At first, maybe they trade. A bundle of hides for grain. A stone blade for dried meat. A marriage arrangement to connect two groups. A shared ritual beside the river. But hunger changes the meaning of every gesture. A neighbor becomes a threat. A stranger becomes a thief waiting for darkness. A path between villages becomes dangerous. And then one night, a storage pit is opened. Grain is gone. Footprints lead away from the settlement. Maybe nobody knows who did it. Maybe everybody knows. The elders argue. The young men sharpen spears. Mothers pull children closer to the hearth. No one sleeps easily. And in the morning, a small group walks out to demand payment. They do not think they are starting a war. They think they are correcting a wrong. That may be how many first wars began, not with conquest, but with revenge. Shocked faces, while a few armed men point toward distant footprints. Archaeology gives us dark clues. Long before written history, some human settlements show signs of violent death, defensive walls, mass burials, and bodies injured by weapons. At places like Jebel Sahaba in the Nile Valley, dating back thousands of years before farming fully transformed the region, human remains show evidence of repeated violent conflict. Later, in Neolithic Europe and the Near East, villages begin to show patterns that look more and more like organized attacks. People killed together, homes burned, settlements fortified, communities living with the expectation of danger. This does not mean every early village was constantly at war, but it shows something important. When humans began forming larger, more settled communities, violence could scale up. One death could become a feud. One raid could become a memory. One memory could become a reason to strike first. Before kings, justice was personal. If someone from another group killed your brother, there was no police force, no court, no written law, no neutral judge. There was the family. There was the clan. There was the memory of blood. So revenge became a kind of law before law. And revenge is dangerous because it does not end where it begins. One killing demands another. One ambush demands a counter-ambush. One stolen herd becomes a burned hut. One burned hut becomes a massacre. Over time, people start preparing not just to survive nature, but to survive each other. This is one of the most haunting changes in early civilization. The same intelligence that helped humans build homes also helped them build defenses. The same cooperation that helped humans harvest fields also helped them organize attacks. The same storytelling that helped communities remember ancestors also helped them remember enemies. The same story cooperation that war was not only about hunger, it was also about land. The first farmers did not just use land, they transformed it. They cleared fields, dug irrigation channels, planted crops, protected herds, and returned to the same places year after year. That work created attachment. A field was not simply useful, it held labor, it held memory, it held the bones of ancestors buried nearby. It held the future of children who would eat from it. So when another group moved closer, the threat felt deeper than simple competition. It felt like invasion. Even a small boundary could become sacred. This side of the stream is ours. That hill belongs to our dead. These animals carry our mark. That path is not yours anymore. And once humans believed land could belong to a group, war became much easier to justify. Then came another force that made conflict more dangerous: surplus. Surplus sounds like a miracle. More grain than needed today, more animals than needed for one meal, more tools, more pots, more stored wealth. But surplus creates inequality. Some families store more. Some leaders control distribution. Some people guard the grain. Some people decide who gets fed. And wherever wealth gathers, raiders eventually notice. A mobile hunter-gatherer band might not have much to steal, but a settled village full of stored food, animals, tools, and people, that is a target. This may be one reason early communities began building walls. Walls are one of the clearest signs that fear had become part of architecture. A wall says, "We expect danger." A gate says, "Not everyone can enter." A tower says, "We are watching." Before the first empires, before massive armies, the first defensive walls were already telling a story. Civilization was not born in peace, it was born behind barriers. And then something even more powerful appeared: leadership. In a crisis, people listen to whoever can organize them. The best hunter, the strongest fighter, the elder who remembers past attacks, the man who can speak with confidence when everyone else is afraid. At first, this leader may not be a king. He may not wear a crown. He may have no palace, no throne, no written title. But when danger comes, he tells people where to stand. Who guards the grain? Who watches the river? Who carries the spears? Who attacks at dawn? War gives power to organizers. And once a leader proves he can protect the group, people may continue obeying him after the danger ends. This is one of the hidden ways war helped create authority. Not because people loved being ruled, but because fear makes command feel necessary. For the first time, violence could become strategy. Not just anger, not just revenge, planning, scouting, waiting, choosing the weakest moment. Attacking when the other village is asleep, when their hunters are gone, when their fields are ready to harvest, when their animals are gathered in one place. That is when war becomes more than fighting. It becomes organized human intelligence aimed at destruction. And this is where the first war may have truly started, in the mind, before the spear was thrown. Someone realized that a group could plan violence together. Someone realized fear could be used as a weapon. Someone realized that killing one enemy might scare 10 more into surrender. That realization changed everything. But we have to be careful. The first war was probably not one single event. There was no first battlefield with a sign that said, "War begins here." Instead, war likely emerged slowly, in different places, as human communities grew larger, settled longer, stored more food, and became more attached to territory. In some places, conflict may have been rare. In others, it may have been constant. Some communities traded, married, and shared rituals with neighbors. Others fortified themselves and prepared for raids. Human history has never been one simple story, but the pattern is clear. The more humans built, the more they had to defend. The more they stored, the more others could steal. The more they belonged to a group, the easier it became to fear another group. And once they became dangerous in the imagination, violence could be justified before it even happened. There is a brutal irony here. The first steps toward civilization may have made humans safer from hunger, weather, and wild animals. But they also made humans more dangerous to each other. A village can protect children. A village can store food. A village can pass down knowledge. But a village can also create boundaries, and boundaries create enemies. A wall protects the people inside, but it also tells the people outside they do not belong. This is the paradox at the heart of early civilization. Humans gathered together to survive, then had to survive the consequences of gathering together. Slowly darkening as a wall forms around it and distant armed figures appear outside. Eventually, these small conflicts became something larger. As villages grew into towns and towns grew into cities, war became more organized. Leaders became chiefs. Chiefs became kings. Warriors became soldiers. Raids became campaigns. Walls became fortresses. Revenge became politics. By the time the first great cities rose in Mesopotamia, war was no longer an accident. It was part of the system. Cities needed land. Fields needed water. Canals needed workers. Temples needed offerings. Kings needed authority. And nothing strengthened authority like an enemy at the gate. In the earliest city-states, war could decide who controlled irrigation, trade routes, farmland, labor, and prestige. Victory did not just bring survival, it brought status, wealth, captives, tribute, power. The first war may have started as a desperate raid over food, but later wars would be fought for something far more dangerous: control. Temple platform, canal, and small organized ranks of spear-carrying warriors. And here is the part that feels disturbingly modern. The emotions that fed early war are still recognizable: fear of losing resources, anger over a past injury, suspicion of outsiders, a leader promising protection, a story about why we are right and they are dangerous. War did not require modern weapons to exist. It only required humans to organize fear. Before bronze swords, there were stone blades. Before chariots, there were feet moving silently in the dark. Before written propaganda, there were stories told around fires. Before empires, there were villages teaching their children which neighbors to trust and which ones to fear. So how did the first war start? Maybe with hunger, maybe with revenge, maybe with a stolen herd, a murdered hunter, a disputed field, or a riverbank that two communities needed to survive. But beneath all of those causes was something deeper. Humans had begun to build worlds that could be lost. Homes, fields, grain stores, walls, ancestors, children, identity. Once people had something permanent, they also had something to defend permanently. And once they believed another group could take it, war became possible. Not inevitable, possible. That distinction matters, because early humans also cooperated. They traded, they formed alliances, they shared tools, genes, rituals, and ideas across huge distances. War was not the only path, but it became one path. And once societies discovered that organized violence could protect resources, punish enemies, and create power, the path widened. Village by village, wall by wall, grave by grave, until one day, The first kings would look out from the first cities and understand a terrible truth. Fear could build a throne. The difference war did not start because humans were monsters. It started because humans were vulnerable. They could starve. They could lose children. They could be raided. They could remember pain. They could love a place so deeply that they were willing to kill for it. And maybe that is what makes the first war so haunting. It was not the opposite of civilization. It was one of civilization's shadows. The moment humans began building the first permanent worlds, they also began asking the oldest political question in history. Who gets to live here? Who gets the water? Who owns the harvest? Who belongs inside the wall? And who must be kept outside? The first war began when those questions could no longer be answered with words, gifts, marriages, or warnings. It began when one group crossed a boundary and another group decided that boundary was worth dying for, or killing for. Long before empires carved their names into stone, long before armies marched beneath kings, the first war may have started in a place that looked almost peaceful. A village, a river, a field, a wall. And two groups of human beings, both afraid, both hungry, both certain they were protecting their future. That is the frightening truth. War was not born in the ruins of civilization. War was born at the beginning of it.